Alright, so this was posted yesterday, and I've already watched, like, I think Rax Rantax's brief video on it, but I figure I'd go over it myself and give my own input and opinions. This is just their feedback, or their basically response to our feedback in the March 17 and 24th betas. All of this is just flavor text. It's basically saying, thank you, we listened, we're doing shit. Or we're doing stuff, excuse my French. Anyway, so first changes is the dungeons. They changed the layouts. One of the most common pieces of feedback we received is that players felt that there was doing a lot of backtracking in the dungeons. I didn't personally find this too much of an issue, but a lot of people did. And it was like that if you missed some key things, or if you're not the kind of person that likes to fully explore some areas. Sometimes you miss some monsters and then you have to backtrack to kill them again. They've optimized multiple dungeons in order to reduce the amount of backtracking, basically. And then they gave a list of the different dungeons they went into and changed. Um, They also made it so that, oh wait, the developers note, our primary goal with the layout changes was to reduce certain kinds of backtracking which detracted from a player's experience. An example of this change is that players previously needed to enter side rooms to interact with structure objectives, causing them to retread the same path. Now many of our structure objectives have been repositioned along the main dungeon pathways, making it easier for players to reach and allow them to readily explore the dungeon after defeating the structure. Okay, like I said, I mean, I didn't personally find the backtracking to be as big of an issue that a lot of people did, but it was a common complaint with a lot of people, so it's good that they listened to it. They changed the events that spawn in the dungeons from a 10% chance to a 60% chance. So they increased it sixfold, essentially. So there's a 6 times higher chance of an event happening than there was when we played the beta, which I think that's cool. I like the events that pop up, and some of the events are like kill these things over in this corner or whatever, and some of the events are like cursed shrines or cursed chests or something like that. I think that's kind of neat. I like that they increased the chance. Dungeon gameplay. To reduce the need to backtrack, again with the backtracking, small numbers of straggling monsters will seek out the player to help complete the kill all monsters objectives. So, in a small way, if you miss things, or if you're kiting them or something on purpose, they will follow you a little bit better, it sounds like. Which could be a good thing, could be a bad thing if you're actually trying to like get away from them because you're like struggling. I don't know. I didn't struggle that much in the dungeons, so I don't think it'll be that big of an issue. But I can see it potentially for someone who's not doing well. The monsters basically sticking to them a lot more could increase their difficulty, which honestly, the difficulty is not a high bar, at least not until the later difficulties in the dungeons, like nightmare dungeons. When Animus is gathered, the players and nearby allies will gain 10 resource and reduce all active cooldowns by 1 second. That's kind of neat because I think there's some quests where you gain a certain amount of Animus until it's at a full bar and then blah blah blah. So, depositing the Animus channel time was reduced from 3 to 0 seconds. So, instantly depositing the Animus instead of a 3-second cast. That's good, make things faster, cool. The time to rescue was reduced from 3 to 1.5 seconds, so it was reduced by half. Um, I don't know if rescue, if this is talking about revival, like when people die. I don't know. I think that's what it's talking about. Unless it's talking about something else, like rescuing an NPC or something. But I think this is talking about when one of your party members die, you can revive them in 1.5 seconds instead of 3. But I could be wrong. All rescue objectives now drop a health potion upon completion. So no, it sounds like I was wrong. It's not the revival. It's objectives in the dungeon. So I was wrong there. This is about dungeon gameplay, so I should have known. While carrying the ancient statue, bloodstone, mechanical box, or stone carving, you will receive a momentum bonus granting a 25% movement speed increase to you and nearby allies. So yeah, like Rax was saying, if that's going to be usable to get a movement speed buff through the entire dungeon or through a good chunk of the dungeon, the meta is going to be pick up one of those so that you and your allies get a increase to movement speed and then utilize that movement speed before letting go of the objective. We'll see if that's abusable or not. I'm sure if it is, it will be the meta, and you will know because everyone will be posting about it. Pedestals that have had their channel time reduced from 2 to 0 seconds, so that's also instant now. That's good. Pedestals were kind of annoying too, it's whatever. I mean, this is minor stuff to me, it's not that big of a deal, but it's quality of life, so. Returning a portable object to the pedestal now fully restores health, resource, potions, and resets all cooldowns of all nearby players, not just yourself. So that's pretty big. Basically, you turn in the objectives to the pedestal, and then all of a sudden, boom, you're like a fresh person. And so is everyone in your party. And then that way, when you go into the next zone, which usually is a boss fight, or oftentimes can be a boss fight, you're fresh with everything, and you don't have to wait for cooldowns to come back up and stuff. That's cool. I don't mind that. All doors now generate a mini map ping when they are opened. That's whatever. I mean, unless you're some person that gets lost in the dungeons really easily, that's not going to be too much of a difference. It'll just be, I guess, easier to utilize. I don't know. Easier to like look where you're going, I guess, but it shouldn't be that hard anyway. All structure objectives in the dungeon now have additional combat mechanics players must overcome. I don't know what that means. All additional objectives in the dungeons now have additional combat mechanics. What are combat mechanics exactly? Um, and their structures. So, is it saying that it's going to be like the traps in PoE, where you have to like avoid preventable damage, or um, or avoidable damage rather? Or is it going to be like there's going to be monsters with abilities, or it's going to be like abilities like monsters have, like zone sections that are gonna like do damage to you periodically, or I don't know. That's kind of what I read when I read that. But anyway, it's I'm sure still gonna be manageable, so that'll be whatever. While our dungeons offer a variety of objectives to complete, player feedback stated that the actions of completing each objective felt tedious. We hope that providing bonuses such as the increase to mobility while carrying objective items will streamline and vary the experience of completing objectives. This adjustment is merely a starting point, and we intend to extend this philosophy to keys in a future update. All right, classes. So in general, all classes, effects like stun and freeze can be applied to elite monsters twice as long as they before they become unstoppable. So basically, you can stun and freeze NPCs twice as long now. Okay, cool. I didn't feel like it was that big of an issue. I mean, I played through all of these classes, all to 25, by the way, and I never once honestly felt like I don't know, maybe I just didn't stun them and freeze them as much as other people did. I didn't rely on CCs to mitigate their damage, I guess. I don't know. And that's probably why sometimes I would probably die. But either way, I felt like I was powerful enough to not worry about that. But to each their own, and some people have more issues with that than others, I guess. Reviewing class skills to confirm or they reviewed class skills to confirm that all classes have access to sufficient skills that remove CC. Okay. So basically, if you want to have a build that removes CC from you, like I think a good example of this is the ice block that mages have, or sorks have, as well as their teleport, get them out of things that are like out of CCs that they were in. Um, I think the druid had one where trample would get them out of a CC. So if I got stunned by that one mob that sucks life out of you and like hits you pretty hard for a few seconds, I could always trample out of that. That would be an example of what this is talking about. Many legendary powers have had updates to their effectiveness. So basically, some legendary powers they feel like were not effective, and they have increased that effectiveness or changed it so that it's now effective. So basically, they're going to make some legendary powers that appeared weak to appear more strong. With the barb specifically, which I felt the barb had issues with, I mean, being melee basically. Yeah, the issue with melee is you have to move out of combat a lot. So bosses like that werewolf, where the werewolf spawns extra packs of wolves that CC you if you get hit, and then also disappears like for a little while and then like pops up on you and stuff like that. That werewolf boss I felt with the barb especially felt very weak because I felt like being melee was making me weak against it. The reason I felt that way is because I had trouble using Frenzy as a barb, which was a good ability up until experienced that boss. But Frenzy was giving me issues with that boss in particular because I felt like I was trying to kite it to avoid damage because it was doing so much damage. And the mob isn't even completely kiteable either. So what I ended up having to do to beat it was actually go instead of frenzy to go with what was that ability called? The bleed. There was a bleed that was a different ability for the basic thing, and it allowed me to do more damage passively as I kited because I was kiting so often. Anyway, so I felt that was the issue with the barbarian. Other than that, the barbarian, especially once you got like legendaries and stuff, felt pretty strong. It was just kind of at first that it felt weak. A flat 10% passive damage reduction has been added to the Barbarian class. Some skill tree passives had their damage reduction effects reduced to compensate. So basically, to prevent it from being too strong, they reduced some of the passive damage reductions on the tree. I feel like this is going to make it so that you don't choose those damage reductions on the tree as often because you already have this flat 10% that's guaranteed no matter what you do. I don't know if this part is a good thing, but we'll see if they're still used or not. I have a feeling though that the damage reduction is not going to be used as much in the tree and you're going to opt for stronger damage instead. Um but this is nice. Damage reduction is going to be nice where you don't have to throw talent points at it and instead you can increase your damage output or your mobility or something like that. Their whirlwind skill now deals more damage and consumes more fury. Okay, so without any legendaries, when I tried to whirlwind, it was nice to be able to position myself better because you can go through enemy hitboxes and then end up wherever you want. It was okay area damage, like like AOE damage, but it wasn't very good single target damage. And it felt at first, especially without the legendaries and all of that, it felt like I was fury starved already. Like I would not have enough fury to whirlwind all the time. So the fact that it deals more damage now, but it feels like it's gonna have more fury required. I feel like that's gonna make it feel very fury starved, especially without the proper items and stuff to support it, um, which could potentially be a negative. But I guess you'll have a shorter burst window of higher damage to compensate for the fact that you'll be more fury starved, at least initially. We'll see how that goes. I don't really know how that works. It, from what I hear, endgame Whirlwind was pretty strong. Endgame being past the 25 levels that we were allowed in the betas. Oh well. The double swing, which I actually never tested double swing, sadly. So I don't know anything about this ability. The double swing skill enhancement refunds its full fury cost when used on stunned or knockdown enemies. So basically, it makes it so that you can double swing more often if you have a combo where you're stunning and knocking them down and then hitting them with double swing to maintain your fury. That's cool. Alright, Druid. Druid in the beta 1 to 25 had the most trouble. Um, and part of that I think was what it was because the class specialization was not accessible because we had to go to another zone to access it at level 15, but we didn't have access to the other zone to go get it for the Druid quest. So I'm not sure how much stronger that specialization makes the Druid because I never got to play close. Sorry, for some reason my headset just randomly shut off, probably because I'm not listening to anything, but it's just trying to save battery or something. Anyway, long story short, Druid felt weak in the beta because it didn't have access to its specialization, plus it might have even been weak, at least in the leveling process 1 to 25. I've heard from people in closed beta that Druid endgame was super strong, even OP. I don't know if it's been like downsized since then or if it's been brought under control, but it's supposedly very strong at endgame. But leveling 1 to 25, especially without the specialization, felt horrible compared to the other classes. Anyway, if I hadn't known how good the other classes were, I would have felt somewhat okay with the druids leveling, honestly. So it's not like it felt really horrible to level as a druid 1 to 25. It was like it felt really horrible knowing that I could be leveling as well as I was on the other classes. So, anyway, companion skills have now been heavily increased. That is good. That is very good because I completely skipped over the companion part of the tree. Didn't touch it. Nothing there looked strong enough to use. I was just completely uninterested. So it was just free points to avoid. Now I might have to look at, because I am probably going Druid main. I might have to actually look at whether the companions are better to utilize now or not. All ultimate skills have had their cooldowns reduced. So that was good because all the ultimates in the Druid tree seemed like they have really high cooldowns as far as number of seconds. And that was a complaint that I had and a lot of people had. So that'll make the ultimates more significant, I think, which that will be nice. Um, I'm not sure which ultimates will be better now or how much they reduced it, but at least they're better in general. So usability improvements have been made to Maul and Pulverize. Maul and Pulverize, I believe, are both bear abilities. Um, and usability improvements, I don't know exactly what that means, but I'm guessing that it means damage or effectiveness on in combat, which is good because I actually wanted to go a bear build. Bear build with tornadoes is what I was thinking of going. Um, Using a non-shapeshifting skill with transform will transform a druid back into their human form. I don't really know what that means because I'm not sure how or what stats are affected by their human form, or if it's just gonna weaken it because you no longer get the buffs from being a bear, for example, or something like that. So I don't know. And then it kind of feels like druids needed a little bit more, but this might, if they change these skills significantly, and it does say things like heavily increased right here, but that's for the companion skills, which were completely not used at all. But it feels almost like you need more. But again, I didn't play closed beta, and supposedly closed beta druids were pretty strong endgame. So maybe this is all that was needed for endgame. We'll see. Necromancer felt really strong when I was leveling it. It looks like summon minions will die more often, requiring players to utilize corpses more often. Which I guess that's a good thing because they basically never died. I didn't have any issue. I mean, they died on boss fights, and that's about it. When it came to actually like just clearing maps and stuff, um, clearing the dungeons and stuff like that, they weren't dying. So the fact that they're more mortal, I guess you could call it, is good. Gonna actually require you to replace them more often and keep the numbers up. Keep an eye on the stacks of monsters that you have summoned, stuff like that. Many monsters in the Book of the Dead have their stats increased. Book of the Dead was the specialty of the Necromancer, and I believe um, you could do things like have the skeletal mages or whatever, and have them do special abilities or special like you can have one more of this summon or whatever, just stuff like that. I think that was what the Book of the Dead is, if I'm not mistaken. And I this was the last class that I played to 25, so I have the least amount of info on it. But um, yeah, Book of the Dead seemed to have had a buff, which is a good thing. The damage dealt by a corpse explosion has been reduced. That is probably needed. Corpse Explosion was one of their stronger abilities. There was a build that I was trying to put together, but I didn't have the legendary for, that would basically infinitely corpse explode while I was in a blood pool spec, or I don't know. It was kind of neat. It looked really cool, but I didn't ever actually have the legendary in time so that I could test it. But Corpse Explosion was basically a really easy way to level up, and once you had it, it was like pff, kill everything, just like it was in D3. The brightness of skeletal warriors and mages has been reduced. I don't like that. People were whining about that. I actually liked being able to see them better, so I don't know why they really didn't like the how bright it was. That was silly. I think that's a mistake or an error in judgment, personally. But whatever. I mean, some people like their aesthetics so much that it has to be like grim and dark all over there, including your summons. Yeah, that's whatever. Rogue. Okay, so I played Rogue. I played Rogue as a complete range class, treating it as a demon hunter, and it felt pretty easy to play, but weak and not strong. The way that I was playing it was basically an auto attack build where I just autoed things from afar and killed them. No movement skills, no like heavy damage or anything. The second time I leveled a rogue, um, that first rogue died, by the way, at like level 16 or something on hardcore. So I remade on softcore to make sure that I got to 25 and was able to test it more. But um, I leveled a melee, and I forget the ability name, but it was basically like where I'd hit something, walk over here, and then the damage from that would come back towards me, and if anything was in the path, um, back to me, it would hit them like a boomerang kind of skill. I like that a lot, and it was very good and very strong. Anyway, upgrades to subterfuge skills have had their bonuses increase. I don't really know what subterfuge skills are, but I know that that's a whole tree or a whole section in a tree. So one whole section in their tree was increased. That's just a flat bonus, so that's good. They were basically buffed. Multiple passive skills have had their bonuses increased. So if you choose passive talents, they are now stronger choices instead of skilled talents. if you rather go the passive route where you just get increased passive damage, increased passive poison, increased passive armor, whatever. They're stronger now. I feel like that's a good thing. I like passives personally because it's less that I have to think about, honestly. All imbuement skills have had their cooldowns increased. Increased. So that means imbuement skills have been nerfed, if I'm not mistaken. Um, an imbuement was like adding poison damage to your attacks or whatever, right? It's like a enchantment almost. It's either talking about their cooldowns increased on how long they last, or cooldowns increased on how long till you can use them again. If it's how long till you can use them again, then that is a nerf. If it's the opposite and it's just how long they last, so they last longer, then it obviously is a buff. So, but the way I'm reading this, it sounds like a nerf to imbuement skills. Sorcerer. Charge bolt damage was increased and the mana cost to cast has decreased. So charge bolt was buffed. That's good. Decrease the damage to chain lightning and reduces effectiveness against bosses. So chain lightning was nerfed. Charge bolt was increased and buffed. They decreased the cooldown to incinerate skills enchantment bonus. So they decreased the cooldown of the enchantment bonus. That's a nerf to it. Incinerate skills enchantment bonus, basically. Firewalls now spawn underneath enemies more frequently when using its enchantment bonus. So they buffed Firewall so that it was more effective. And then increased the lucky hit chance for Meteor's skills enchantment bonus. To my understanding, Meteor's skill enchantment bonus is when you get a lucky hit, there's a percent chance after you get that lucky hit for the meteor skill to then enact itself. So it's a buff to the frequency of this RNG ability, basically, which that's good. It'll make it more often. Whenever we introduce changes to our classes, it is with the goal of making both them and their skills feel impactful and powerful. Your feedback has helped us uphold this ideal. Some players have adeptly noticed that certain skills were too powerful. One of our goals for skills is to have them be interesting to wield and interactive in terms of itemization and combat feel. We've made some changes to help with this or in this regard, with one example being the Necromancer's minions. We've made a change that makes them more vulnerable in combat, which will make Raising the Dead a more active component of the Necromancer's gameplay. Launch is just the first step of our class balance journey, and you can expect further updates to that iteration of this pillar of Diablo 4. Basically, we're we're doing these changes for launch, but we're gonna do more after launch. And Necromancer specifically is a little bit nerfed so that they actually have to summon their stuff more often. Feels good, man. UI. Fix issues with the built-in screen reader where the built-in screen reader was not reading key prompts, game options, and other UI text. I don't really know what that means. Fix an issue where actions could not be bound to the mouse wheel. A lot of people would like to do that. Having the ability to do that, I think, is important. I'm not going to utilize that personally. Fix an issue where evade couldn't be bound to the right analog stick on a controller. I don't play with controllers, not a problem for me, but good for them. Chat will now display on the left side of the screen when using the centered action bar configuration. Okay, so you can change the position of where chat is. Instead of the right, it'll be on the left. Cool. A character's stats will be displayed by default when players click the materials and stats button within their inventory. Okay, so that's a little bit of a change UI wise. Yeah, obviously, UI section. The move and interact inputs can now be mapped to one button, while the primary attack input is mapped to a secondary button. Cool. And the sans serif font used in-game has been replaced with a new serif font. Okay, whatever. Some people had an issue with the font. Whatever. Encounters. Fixed multiple issues that allow bosses like the Butcher to become unresponsive. Okay, I never experienced that myself, but if that was an issue, cool. Glad they fixed it. The Butcher has been reevaluated for difficulty and will present a greater challenge in tiers 3 and 4. So we were only able to experience tiers 1 and 2. So I'm assuming that the Butcher's difficulty in 1 and 2 will remain the same, but in 3 and 4 will be greatly increased. Or, yeah, will be increased. Nothing wrong with that. Bosses such as Tchort, Malnock, I don't know why I'm trying to read these names, and others were reevaluated for melee character difficulty, resulting in changes to attacks and fight mechanics. I like this. This was a big issue. I was complaining about melees having such a significant disadvantage in, especially when I was talking about Barb earlier, like that werewolf fight. I don't know if one of these guys is werewolf boss, but if it's a werewolf boss, cool, because that was one of the ones that was difficult. Fixed an issue with vampire brutes using the shadow enchant affix would chain cast impale. Okay. Sellers, which are basically like glorified loot pinatas. I don't know. I mean, they're basically little square sections of area underneath the ground that you go and kill for a few seconds. It increases the chance of a dungeon event to occur in a cellar, so that's cool. You get more chances at events in cellars now. Sellers will now, it doesn't say how much though, which I don't like. Sellers will now consistently reward a chest upon completion. Good. At least you'll get a chest instead of just killing mobs and that's it. Fixed an issue where sellers would prematurely be marked as complete. I never experienced that, so it wasn't an issue for me, but glad they fixed it. Fixed an issue where the guaranteed elite monster would be absent from a seller. I'd also never experienced that, but I'm glad they fixed it. General quality of life. They fixed an issue where players could increase attack speed by move canceling attacks early. I think that this was in a YouTube video I never actually watched, but about attack speed being able to stack infinitely or something like that. So I'm glad they fixed that. Um, yeah, fix an issue where characters weren't immune and untargetable after loading into an area. That's good. So like in hardcore, especially if you load into an area and you aren't completely loaded in yet, your character can't just die to whatever's on the other side. That's good for hardcore, especially. The reset dungeon button has been disabled. And I don't know what this means, but I think that means we can't chain run dungeons, in which case we have to do the campaign mode or and just do dungeons casually on the side. I don't know if that's the case or not, or if they just have a different way of resetting the dungeon, or if it auto resets or what. But we'll find out. While Diablo 4's Sanctuary is home to over 100 dungeons, the open beta only had subset offered in Act 1's Fractured Peaks for players to explore, and a level cap that isn't a full representation of the experience at launch. There are many reasons to complete a variety of dungeons. They're stressing a variety, including collecting powerful affixes in the power Codex of Power, and players will still be able to repeat dungeons by partying up with others and having them start the dungeon. So it sounds like to repeat a dungeon, you have to be in a party with other people who who will start the dungeon, and that'll reset it, if I'm reading that correctly. We also wanted to make sure that resetting the dungeon wasn't a way for hardcore players to avoid death when experiencing a challenge in a dungeon. Still, we know it can be fun to repeat a specific dungeon, and the team is looking at a more permanent solution to this, like having some reasonable cap on how many times the same dungeon can be completed in a row to better support that style of play. In fact, in the full game, players will acquire sigils that will unlock nightmare dungeons, which are specifically designed to be completed repeatedly and are optimized to be highly rewarding and replayable. We'll have more to share on this in the future. And I don't know if this was in Arax's video, but I do know that this was constantly questioned. So this, I think, looks like it's something that was added later. Fix an issue that caused Gale Valley and Serac Rapture to have less monsters than intended until the campaign quests in those territories are completed. Cool. And that's that, folks. So 35 minutes. Sorry if it was a little bit long, but we got through it. Thanks for coming. Talk to you later. Bye.